Some say that the shearing of Roshen at the south end of Elvennin comes from the Manx word Roisen, which means a little peninsula. It can be a wild, desolate coastline where strange things are seen but never spoken of. But the story of the Ben Varrey is told on wild, dark nights before the glowing embers after the children are safely to bed. It is a story told in hushed tones, lest the howling tempest carry the words to the deeps of the dark sea outside. In Kilmurray, there lived a fisherman named Odo Paden. He was a poor man, not making much of a living. The inclement weather did not help. One day he was casting his nets along Craig ní Scarú, which is the rock of the cormorants, and feeling pretty desperate, for there were fishes all around him and not one in the bottom of his boat. Suddenly he found a Ben Varrey perched on his gunwale, smiling at him enticingly. For a moment he thought he was seeing a vision and crossed himself and shut his eyes. When he looked up again, she was still there. Now a Ben Varrey is a sea maiden, what some may call a mermaid. Mugrimi, Odo Paden, she greeted. Are you not getting enough fish? He sighed. True enough, at this rate I shall be starving by tomorrow. Would you reward me if I filled your net? She asked. I would if I had the means to do so, but I have not. Are you married? She asked. I am not, nor have I a wish to be. She pouted. Well, if you will marry me, I will ensure that your nets are filled and that you are well provided for. He sniffed in disapproval. What use are you to me as a wife? You can't even leave the ocean. That I could, but only if you follow my advice. If you promise to marry me, I shall fill your nets, and among fish I will put there a great silver sea trout. Now you must not eat that fish, but tomorrow morning you will take it to Port Erin and demand a gold sovereign for it. Then come back, throw the gold sovereign into the sea by Craig ní Bach. Now Craig ní Bach was a dangerous place, and means appropriately enough the rock of drowning. He thought for a moment and found the only alternative was to remain without a fish and starve. So he promised to obey and marry her. Before long the nets were filled, and sure enough there was a big silver trout there. He laid this aside when he returned home that night. The next morning he took it in a sack, and there was a fair in Port Erin that day. He dallied there and came across a great crowd gathered in a circle around a showman. He peered forward to see what the attraction was. Seated on the ground was a cat with a fiddle, and before him was a mouse and a cockroach. The cat struck up a tune on his fiddle, and the mouse and the cockroach began to dance. It was such a lively tune that everyone around began to clap and jig and dance and laugh and call to one another. Never was there such a happy crowd. Then the showman picked up the cat and its fiddle, the mouse and the cockroach, and put them in a sack. He held out his hat, and soon it was filled with a clinking mass of coins. The man, seeing Odo Paden watching him, gave him a friendly grin. You seem a sensitive sort of fellow. How would you like to buy my animals and make yourself a fortune? I've made enough money, and I quite want to retire. I'd like it fine, Odo Padan agreed, for he was still counting up how much the man must have made. But I have no money. It's not money I'm after. Didn't I say I would have enough? I really fancy a dish of fine sea trout. I'd give the cat and the fiddle for a dish like that. Immediately, Odo Paden showed him his sack with the sea trout. Now we can make a bargain. I'll give you the cat and the fiddle for that sea trout. Odo Paden frowned, remembering his promise. I rather wanted a gold sovereign for it. Gold sovereigns you'll get a plenty if you have the cat and fiddle. And if you come here again tomorrow with another trout, I will exchange the mouse for it, and for a third such trout you may have the cockroach. Now, Odo Paden had never had money in his life and thought the bargain too great to miss, so he took the cat and the fiddle back to his cottage by the sea. That night the rain lashed on the windows of the cottage, rain mingled with salt sea spray, and when he went to look on the inclement weather, Odo Paden saw the mermaids sitting on the shore. Odo Paden, you have sold the sea trout, but where is the gold sovereign you promised me? She called sternly. I did better than get you a sovereign, he replied. What is better than I being able to get ashore? He held up the cat and the fiddle and set them on the window ledge and told them to play. She looked on with a sad smile. It is amusing, but how does it help me get to the shore or get you a full net? Give me another silver sea trout and you'll see, he said. Early the next morning he found another sea trout on his door and hurried off to Port Erin. There was still the fair, and he saw a crowd gathered in a circle. There was the showman, and on the ground before him were the mouse and the cockroach. The showman started to whistle, and the mouse and the cockroach began to dance. Soon the crowd were whistling and dancing and laughing, and never were people more happy in their lives. At the end of the dance, the man picked up the mouse and the cockroach, put them in the sack, and then held out his cap. He looked up and saw Odo Paden. "So you're back again?" "Back with a fine silver sea trout," agreed Odo. "In that case, I will exchange the mouse for your trout. Just think of the money you can make with the cat, the fiddle, and the mouse." Odo had rather wanted the cockroach as well, but he settled for the mouse. "If you have a third silver sea trout, you can have the cockroach." Off went Odo back to his cottage. That night another storm lashed at his cottage windows. He went to the window, and there was the mermaid waiting patiently. "Where is the gold sovereign which you promised, Odo?" she said. "I have something better." "What is better than I being able to get ashore?" He took out the mouse and set it on the windowsill, placed the cat and the fiddle by it, and told them to strike up a tune. The mouse raised itself on its hind legs and began to dance while the cat scraped away on the fiddle. The mermaid smiled with sadness. "Fine that is, but where is my gold sovereign? How am I to get ashore?" "Give me a third silver sea trout, and I'll be back tomorrow night." Next morning, sure enough, there was a silver sea trout outside his cottage, and he went off to Port Erin. He saw the man again. The man whistled, and the cockroach began to dance, and everyone else around began to dance. They laughed and smiled, and never were people so happy. Then the showman put the cockroach in the sack, passed round his hat, and in the blink of an eye it was filled with coins. He spotted Odo. "Back again, Odo, and with another fine sea trout. Well, it is a great bargain that you have. You have released me from the cares and worries of the fair, yet I have made several fortunes, and wish you the same." So Odo went back to his cottage. That night the storm blew hard, with the rain mixing with the salt sea spray. He went to the window, and there the mermaid was waiting patiently. "Where is my golden sovereign, Odo? 3 days are now past, and now the sovereign must be thrown into the sea at Cragaba." "Now I have something which is far better than a golden sovereign." "Better than me being able to come ashore," she said. "Better indeed. This will keep me in riches all my life." He set the mouse and cockroach, the cat and the fiddle on the windowsill, and told them to play. They did so, and she smiled sadly at the sight. When they had stopped and Odo put them away, she turned her sorrowful countenance to him. "Ah, Odo, I could have come ashore and loved and taken care of you. I am a king's daughter who has to remain enchanted in the form of a mermaid until the wicked druid who did this be paid a gold sovereign at the Rock of Drowning, or be made to laugh. As the druid hasn't laughed in 7 long years, small chance of that. Now you have thrown away my only chance of escaping from the sea and obtaining happiness." Hearing this, Odo grew sad, for he found that he was much attracted to the beautiful mermaid. He felt contrite at what he had done. He had been thinking merely of ways of raising money and not of the mermaid's welfare. When he raised his head to apologise to her, he found she had already vanished in the darkness of the storm. That night he made up his mind. He took his belongings and set out for the crag. By that fearsome rock he anchored his boat and shouted, "Druid, if you hear me, come and show your face. Don't be afraid. I am only a poor fisherman here to make you laugh." At once there was a tremendous sound, as if the rocks were cracking asunder, and there, sitting atop, was a tall, thin, dark man with flashing black eyes. "I am not afraid of you, little man." His voice resounded like thunder. "You will have cause to regret your presumptuousness when I feed your body to the denizens of the deep." "No need for that," replied Odo. "I'm here to make you laugh." "Laugh, is it? I've not laughed these 7 years. No humour in this world do I see. Many have tried and failed, and all their bodies are now particles in the deep." "I'm prepared to try." "Then you must obtain from me 3 great laughs. If you do, you shall be at liberty." "I am at liberty now," replied Odo candidly. "If I do this, I want something else from you." "And what is that?" thundered the amazed wizard. "I want the freedom of the mermaid who is the king's daughter. She must be free and allowed to come back and dwell on land." The druid scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Now this is an amusing matter. It appeals to me." He clicked his fingers, and no sooner had he done so than the beautiful mermaid was sitting by his side. Her eyes widened with amazement when she saw Odo. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "Do you not know that you are in grave danger?" "I have come to fulfill my word, lady," replied Odo. "I mean to buy your freedom." The druid smiled. In fact, he almost laughed at the humour of it. "Of that we shall see. Commence. Try to make me laugh." Odo opened his sack and placed the cat with its fiddle, mouse, and cockroach on the deck of his boat. Then he told them to strike up. So surprised was Drogyanta at this exhibition that he gave a big laugh of delight. "That is the first laugh," observed Odo. The cat continued to play while the mouse and cockroach stood on their hind legs and began to jig. The Druid pressed his lips together, but when the jig ended and he saw the mouse bow to the cockroach and the cockroach curtsy to the mouse, he could not hold back another bellow of laughter. "That is the second laugh," observed Odo. Now they set up another dance, and try as they might, the Druid's face remained as grave as stone. Odo was beginning to lose heart, and the mermaid sighed sadly. Then it was that the mouse came to their help, for it pirouetted on one foot, and its long tail whipped round, struck the cockroach, who fell backwards, and upset the cat, who dropped the fiddle on the head of the mouse, who was knocked out. The Druid laughed with tears rolling down his sallow cheeks. "That, I believe, is the third laugh," observed Odo. Immediately the Druid was livid at having laughed, but a bargain was a bargain. The mermaid suddenly had long, beautiful legs and stepped into the boat. She was so beautiful she took Odo's breath away. When the Druid saw her gazing on the fisherman with eyes of love, he grew even more angry. "Bah, if you hadn't tricked me with that cat, mouse, and cockroach." As he said this, the rock suddenly split open, revealing a great fiery furnace in the middle, and into it the Druid fell. Now the reason is plain, as all Manx fishermen know. There are certain words that it is forbidden to say when at sea. Among them is the word for cat, the word for mouse, and the word for cockroach. So when the old Druid said the three forbidden words in the middle of the sea, he was claimed by the infernal powers. No sooner did he get swallowed by the rock than it closed up again and retained its craggy, cold appearance. At the very same time, the cat, mouse, and cockroach suddenly turned into an old fiddler, a young man, and a girl. They thanked Odo for saving them and turning them back into their real forms. It seemed that the evil Druid had turned them into the forms of the creatures because he disliked their music. While he could change their forms, he could not stop their gift to make music and dance. All three swore eternal friendship to Odo and promised to dance at his wedding. And indeed they did, for the princess took Odo to her father's castle. Great was the old king's joy to see his daughter return from the briny deep, where he'd considered her dead, and he showered Odo with riches, made him chancellor, and blessed his marriage to his daughter. And Odo, the poor fisherman, eventually became one of the great princes of Elanvanin. Yet people in Kirkrist will only tell this story in hushed tones. When they put to sea, they'll do their best to avoid the rock of drowning, even though they know that lobsters and crabs can be found nearby. They will avoid the rock, for it is thought to be a gateway to the other world, where the infernal powers await and are ready to scoop up the souls of any fisherman who breaks the taboo by inadvertently using the prescribed words.